If you like storytime vibes, hit subscribe and let's dive in together.
They say a man's biggest fear isn't death. It's being lied to by the one person he chose to share his life with. For 4 years, Alara was my sun, my moon, and all my stars. But it took a single folded piece of paper, a note tucked into the lining of her little black skirt, to shatter my universe and reveal the chilling truth. The woman I loved had been a ghost in our marriage for months. The worst part? She didn't even realize she'd left a trail of breadcrumbs so obvious. A blind man could have found them. My name is Leo, and for the longest time, I was the man who had it all. A decent job in finance, a small but cozy apartment in the Chicago suburbs, and Alara, my wife. She was the kind of woman who filled every room with an effortless charm, making strangers feel like old friends. We'd been together 4 years, married for 2, grinding through the long hours and the tight finances that come with starting a life together. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was solid, or so I believed. The foundation, I realized later, had started to rot the moment I stopped looking closely. It began subtly, like a slow leak behind a wall. First, the phone. It went from being casually left on the kitchen counter to becoming an extension of her hand, face down, screen locked, even when we were just watching TV. Then came the sudden, almost frantic interest in fitness. Alara, who once measured effort in terms of how quickly she could finish a book, was now spending 3 nights a week at a gym I'd never seen the inside of. I told myself, don't be the paranoid husband, Leo. Paranoia is the acid that corrodes a marriage faster than any infidelity. But the night the crack became a fissure, it wasn't about the phone or the gym. It was about her location tag. We shared it. A simple habit. A convenience, really. I was sitting at the dining table, pretending to read a proposal, waiting for her to get home. It was 8:30 p.m. Her office closed at 6:30 p.m. I checked the map. It showed her still at Synergy Solutions HQ. A cold, hollow pit opened in my stomach. The ping hadn't updated for 2 hours. I ran a quick search. Synergy Solutions building requires a key card after 7 p.m. And they turn off the main floor lights. So where was she really? When she finally walked through the door at 9:15 p.m., her hair was perfect, her silk blouse immaculate. She looked stunning, but she also looked startled. Like a deer caught in the headlights of a car she didn't expect to see on a deserted road. "Hey," she said, her voice a little too bright, setting her purse down with an unnatural quickness. "Still up?" I smiled, a tight, false line across my face. "Yeah, just waiting. Late night?" She didn't meet my eyes. Paperwork, last-minute deadline. My chest tightened. I knew her firm's mantra by heart. Precision, not panic. They never had last-minute paperwork, but I just nodded, the lie hanging in the air between us like the heavy scent of a new, unfamiliar perfume. I decided then and there I would find the truth. I needed proof, not just a feeling, because a feeling can be reasoned away, but a cold, hard fact. That's what sets you free. That night, as she showered, I sat on the edge of the bed, the low sound of water filling the silence. Then, a faint ping. Her phone lit up on the counter. Just a flash. Long enough for a name to burn itself onto my retina. Felix. It was a text message preview. My hands balled into fists, but I didn't touch the phone. I hadn't crossed that line yet. But the clock was ticking, and the silence in our home was becoming the loudest sound I'd ever heard. The name Felix became a venom in my veins. It didn't confirm an affair, but it confirmed a secret. And in a marriage, a secret is often just the fuse to the bomb. I spent the next few days in a fog, analyzing every small detail. This wasn't just paranoia. It was focused investigation. I was no longer the loving husband. I was a detective in my own living room. I started noticing the new things. A delicate silver necklace she wore often, one I certainly hadn't bought her. A small receipt from a high-end coffee shop in a part of town nowhere near her office. And the way she reacted whenever I walked near her, she'd jump, a quick, almost imperceptible flinch. Her laughter, once genuine and unrestrained, now sounded brittle, as if she was constantly checking the script in her head. We'd be lying in bed, inches apart, but the emotional distance felt like miles. She'd talk about work, about the weather, about anything but us. I felt like a stranger sleeping next to a beautiful mannequin. I tried to confront her, not directly about Felix, but about the distance. Alara, I said one Friday night, leaning against the counter as she meticulously cleaned a spot that wasn't even dirty. We haven't really talked in weeks. I feel like you're pulling away. She stopped, her back still to me. I'm just stressed, Leo. Work is crushing me. You know how it is. But that was the core of my pain. I did know how it was. We were both working long hours and barely seeing each other, but she was finding time for late night work dinners and gym sessions that had never existed before. She was creating time for something, and it wasn't me. I wanted to scream, to shake her until the truth tumbled out. But the image of her crying, the thought of destroying the fragile peace we still pretended to have, paralyzed me. I still desperately wanted to be wrong. Then came the night of the work dinner, the double date. Irony, right? We were supposed to be celebrating her colleague's promotion. Alara spent an hour getting ready, transforming. She wore a stunning black skirt and a crisp white silk blouse. Her lips were painted a shade of deep crimson I'd never seen. She looked like a woman who was getting ready not for her husband, but for a new audience. She looked beautiful, yes, but crucially, she looked different. As she stood by the door, adjusting her skirt one last time before we left, I saw it, a small white corner sticking out from the waistband, near the inner lining. My heart didn't just drop, it seized. This was it, the proof, the physical evidence I needed. Hey, hold on, I said, my voice steady, almost too light. I walked toward her. You've got something there. She froze, half turning, her eyes wide with a sudden, pure panic. What do you mean? She stammered. Just let me fix it, I insisted. I reached out and with a quick, deliberate tug on the inner lining of her skirt, a folded piece of paper slipped from its hiding place and fluttered silently to the hardwood floor. She went completely pale, utterly still, and lunged for it. But I was faster. I picked it up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the raw, terrifying certainty of what I was about to read. I unfolded the paper. It was handwritten, neatly folded, and the world went silent. My ears rang. The words were simple, blunt, and brutal. Can't wait to see you again tonight. Same place. Felix. The ghost finally had a name and a plan. She stood there, speechless, her lips trembling. Leo, it's not what you think. I just laughed. A quiet, terrifying laugh. The sound of a man who was too stunned to register the pain that had just been handed to him. The note, with its simple, crushing finality, lay on the table between us. I looked at Alara, who was frantically searching my face, not for forgiveness, but for an escape route from the truth. Leo, it's not what you think, she pleaded. I laughed again, that hollow, breathless sound. Then, please, I said, my voice dangerously soft, tell me what I'm supposed to think. Because right now, the only thing I can process is that you hid a rendezvous note in your clothing right before we were supposed to go on a double date. The silence that followed was heavy, confirming everything. She didn't deny the note. She didn't deny Felix. She just stood there, her hands shaking slightly. Finally, she managed to speak, the words tumbling out in a rush of self-pity. It's not an affair. It's complicated. Complicated, that word. The universal code for deceit, for a half-truth wrapped in excuses. I sat down, motioning for her to continue. Go ahead, I said quietly, the calm mask holding steady. Uncomplicate it. She looked down, avoiding my gaze. She mumbled something about Felix being a friend from work, a project they needed to discuss. I cut her off instantly. A friend? Discussing a project at night after you lied to me about paperwork with notes like, can't wait to see you again tonight? Her face crumpled, the tears finally coming, but they didn't move me. I know how it looks, she whispered, breathing unevenly. I just felt unseen. Leo, That word, unseen, hit harder than the revelation of the note. Part of me, the honest, self-critical part, knew there was a fraction of truth in it. I had been distant, focused on my own routine and the daily grind. But distance doesn't give a person a free pass for betrayal. Distance invites honesty. It invites communication. I gave her my fidelity every single day. She repaid me with secrets. So, you felt unseen, I repeated, slowly and deliberately, keeping my tone deadly calm. And instead of talking to the man you promised forever to, you decided to be seen by someone else. She sank onto the couch, covering her face. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I stared at her for a long, quiet moment. That was the last shred of my old marriage dying. It always means something, Alara, I whispered. Always. I stood up, walked to the chair, and grabbed my jacket. The silence stretched until it felt physically unbearable. She looked up, raw fear in her eyes. Leo, please. Her voice trembled. Don't leave like this. I turned back, the note still lying on the table like a judge's verdict. I felt hollow, not angry, just completely, utterly empty. I didn't raise my voice, but the words were the sharpest I'd ever spoken. Alara, I said, looking right through her. You already left. You just forgot to take your body with you. And with that, I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, the sound of the latch clicking, echoing the sound of my heart locking itself away. I drove aimlessly for hours, the Chicago lights blurring past the windshield. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just let the silence sit beside me like the only old friend I had left. My phone buzzed again and again with her name, but I didn't pick up. The search for truth was over. The beginning of the healing, or maybe the end of my world, had just started. I parked by the lake that night, just breathing in the cold, still air. The shock had worn off, replaced by a strange, quiet numbness. I realized something profound in the silence. I wasn't angry at Alara as much as I was disappointed in myself. Disappointed for ignoring the subtle signs, for letting my love become complacent, and for believing that the foundation was still solid when the rot had started underneath. But complacency, I told myself, doesn't excuse cruelty. The next morning I returned home. It was the hardest walk of my life. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes swollen and red, looking utterly defeated, like a child waiting for punishment. She didn't look like the stunning woman in the black skirt from last night. She looked like a broken version of my wife. Before I could even speak, she offered the inevitable. I'll move out, she said quietly. You don't deserve this. I walked past her, poured myself a cup of coffee, and noticed my hands were steady. The trembling was gone. That was the first small victory. I don't need an apology, I told her, my voice calm, clinical. I just need the truth. She hesitated. The fear was still there, but now mixed with a heavy resignation. It started innocent, she began, her voice barely a whisper. Felix, he made me laugh at work. He listened when I complained about things I felt I couldn't bring up with you because you were always so focused. I didn't react to the passive blame. I just waited. I was waiting for the complicated to become simple. She took a deep breath. Then, one night after a client dinner, we kissed. I stopped it immediately. She quickly added, but after that, the guilt, it turned into confusion. I didn't know how to face you. Kissed, not just talking about a project. The secret had been reduced to its rawest, most hurtful form. For the first time, her honesty wasn't about saving the marriage. It was about cleansing her own guilt. And that, paradoxically, gave me a strange sense of peace. The ghost finally spoke its name. I wish you'd told me sooner, I said, putting my coffee cup down. We could have tried to fix it. We could have talked about feeling unseen. But you chose secrets over solutions. You chose a single moment of attention from a colleague over 4 years of building a life with your husband. She nodded, silent tears tracing paths on her swollen cheeks. There was nothing left to say. Her truth, though late, validated my pain and extinguished the final flicker of doubt. I left the apartment that afternoon, carrying only a small bag and the unbearable weight of what used to be. I checked into a hotel, then later found a small, impersonal apartment on the other side of town. The separation was clean, professional, and devastating. Work, gym, silence, repeat. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was slow, like learning to walk on new, broken ground. I knew the physical distance was necessary, but the emotional distance she had created years ago was the one that truly broke me. And now it was time to rebuild a life she no longer had a say in. Weeks turned into months. I established a new routine. Work, gym, silence, repeat. The small, impersonal apartment on the other side of town felt less like a temporary stop and more like a fresh start. Healing wasn't a dramatic, single-day event. It was a slow, granular process. I often thought about that night. The note, the trembling silence, Alara's sudden pallor. I wondered if I'd ever trust the way I used to. I wondered if I could ever look at a late-night text or an unexplained absence without my stomach twisting into a knot. But then, the unexpected happened. One evening, grabbing coffee near the train station, a complete stranger smiled at me. It was a small, kind smile, nothing flirtatious, just a simple acknowledgement of shared humanity. And in that tiny moment, it hit me. The world hadn't ended. It had just changed. The universe didn't collapse because one person failed to be who I needed her to be. My worth wasn't tied to her fidelity or her regrets. A few months later, I received a letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Alara. My hands were steady as I opened it. There was no desperate plea for a second chance. No more excuses. Just 2 short, perfectly weighted paragraphs. She wrote, "Leo, you were good to me in ways I didn't understand until I lost you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you find someone who knows your worth before it's too late." I folded the letter neatly and placed it in my drawer. I let out a long, slow breath. That was the moment of final, true closure. Her guilt was hers to carry, but the forgiveness, that was mine to own. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something you gave to another person. Maybe it was something you gave yourself, for believing that love would always be enough, for allowing yourself to be vulnerable in the first place, for accepting that you had been played, and then choosing to get back up. I walked to the window of my new apartment that night, watching the lights flicker across the city. I realized something simple but profound. And this is the piece of advice I wish I could give every man who finds himself standing where I stood. You can't stop people from betraying you. That's their choice. That's a reflection of their character, not yours. But you can stop letting betrayal define who you are. The scar will always be there, yes, but it doesn't have to be your defining feature. It can become the starting line of the rest of your life. Alara chose the easy, selfish path because she felt unseen, but she missed the point entirely. The true complexity of life isn't in finding someone to temporarily see you. It's in choosing to be the kind of person you can look at in the mirror every morning with absolute, unflinching integrity. She lost a loyal husband, a secure life, and her own self-respect. I lost a woman who had already vanished years ago. For the first time in months, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. I didn't get the revenge I might have craved, but I got something far better. I got my life back, unburdened by her lies, built on a foundation of my own, unbreakable truth. And there's no feeling more empowering, more final, or more sweetly satisfying than that.